Hey guys, this is Chris from Deus Ex Machina, and I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I actually saw the movie, The Late Show, on opening day, and the weekend was really busy, and I was trying to get some friends, and the one guy I wanted to do a live cast with just went on vacation, so I just couldn't get a hold of him. So unfortunately, I'm doing it on a Tuesday, several days after it, and probably at a point where all of you have probably seen it as well. Um, so a little backstory. I will admit of being a bit cynical about this, just because, well, considering the reputation, the last three D&D movies, theatrical release and the two direct-to-video. I don't know if there's two or three direct-to-videos. For the people who don't remember, there were three D&D movies. The first one came out in 2000, and then two direct-to-video ones. And despite the fact that the writer and directors were people who had played D&D. It was a disaster. The script was horrible. The dialogue was horrible. The acting was atrocious. Even by the cast, Jeremy Irons was once asked why he did the D&D movie, and his response was perfect. Is that he said, "I just bought a castle and I needed to pay for it." He definitely hammed it up. It was an atrocious movie. Ironically, the two direct-to-video, not sequels per se, because they shared, I think, a villain, one of the thugs from the 2000 film, but that's it. Nothing else carried over. But the cast was older, more talented. It was still not great. Obviously, way lower budget, so the effects were kind of trash. But they at least tried. But ultimately, the biggest problem with the D&D movies is that they took themselves a bit too seriously. And being a screenwriter, I had thought that if I was to write one, I would do one that was like The Princess Bride, where we would see people playing the game and then we would cut to their story, but where it would be 95% fantasy and the 5% being these people playing the game. And it would have that type of tongue in cheek nature throughout that. And I had some friends that called me out and said that was a horrible idea. I still don't think it's a bad idea. Ultimately, I think the D&D movie went 80% there because what they did create was a D&D like game where we don't hear or see the players of Dungeon Master, in the fact that we still got a very lighthearted comedy. Is it a satirical comedy? Is it incredibly goofy? And thankfully, no. Is it one that has situational humor? Is it quippy? And the answer is partially yes. It's a mix between dialogue based humor, or people character moments where they're talking to each other and funny things happen, or they're making fun of a situation that is itself a little ludicrous. And then there are moments of highbrow situational comedy that is almost approaching satire. And the film mixes those up. There's actually very few moments where the film takes itself 100% seriously. And a part of that has to do with Chris Pine, who is clearly enjoying himself a whole lot. I think everyone's actually enjoying themselves, but I think Chris Pine has probably had issues trying to wipe the smile off his face. The fact that he's the main character and he's a bard, I think, helps. So I said definitely 8.5, but between 8.5 out of 10 was the score I gave. And even though I gave John Wick a 9 out of 10, I would go to see D&D sooner than seeing John Wick. One thing, John Wick's almost 3 hours long. It's still an amazing film. Go see it. But I would see D&D immediately. The only reason why I haven't just jumped back into the theater is because my theater here locally completely blows. But I will definitely get this on digital download. I'll definitely purchase it on 4K. I'm very much looking forward to seeing this again. My wife doesn't like going to theaters, so I'm looking forward to a moment where I can sit down and have her enjoy this film as much as I do. She doesn't play D&D nearly as much. She played it only kind of because I played it for a long time. But I haven't played it in a little bit, and most of the time I bring in my core group, and my wife doesn't generally involve, but she knows how to play the game. So I definitely really enjoyed the game. Sorry, I really enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed the movie, and I gave it about, like I said, 8.5. And even thinking about it now, there are these really amazing moments that I still think about. Like John Wick, I think of like the dragon breath scene, the action. But with D&D, I think of just these moments. And oddly enough, they aren't moments like, isn't it great when they played reference to this cliche, or, oh, isn't it amazing when they cast the real spells? The reason why I liked it was because it was a good movie. Now, is it brilliant? It's not going to win any Oscars. The storyline is very, I wouldn't say thin per se. It's just very obvious, a lot of broad archetypes. And the moment this certain MacGuffin, which is introduced in the beginning of the film, the moment it pops back up again, you know exactly how the film's going to end. You can predict about 30 minutes before the end of the film what's going to happen. And when it does happen, you know exactly what the resolution is going to be. So you saw that was happening so much so that the film, it definitely pulled the drama. It tried to increase the waterworks of the emotion of the scene through some flashbacks and some stuff. But and although I felt the emotion that they were trying to extract, I couldn't get over the fact that it was very obvious and you saw it coming. Um, but I appreciated the detail, the additional effort that they made to make it funny. And I'm going to throw a little shade on this and talk about D&D Shorts, which is a channel I've had mixed feelings on. And he gave it a very mixed review. And he said no one laughed in his theater, and there were only 3 funny moments throughout the whole film. And I don't know what film he watched. Maybe he got confused, or maybe he had a dream and then pretended he saw it. Uh, or in the end, it's probably because he's British. Your British people don't laugh. That's a joke. Uh, but they don't laugh. They just go funny. Um, that's a Robin Williams joke. But the truth about I laughed my ass off at least 4 or 5 times, and the audience definitely laughed. It was a funny movie, and there were moments. And it's one thing when I talk about John Wick, I talk about the sequence around the arch, the dragon breath scene. But with D&D, there are all these little moments. The speak with dead, and then them making jokes about the fact that you get 5 questions. Isn't that a little arbitrary? And then them having to go from corpse to corpse to get the answers that they want. It's very funny. I don't want to go into details on like spoilers, talking about specific things to ruin it. But there were moments. The reason why I mentioned the speak with dead, because you can see that clip online. And me saying it does not convey the humor in the situation. Um, and the paladin walking straight. That's all I need to say. The paladin walking straight was probably the biggest laugh. It had no reason being funny. Everyone saw the joke coming, and I didn't think they would go there, and then they went there, and that was legit funny. The ending final scene, when the characters come out triumphant, like, well, I got spoilers. If you think this is one of those films, you're not paying attention. Like, did you think it was going to be a TPK movie? But it's hilarious to the point that it was incredibly funny. So when this film wants to be really funny, it is incredibly funny. And the action, when it does happen, is very good. There's some really skillful camera work and some cinematic stuff, which I was really appreciative. There's a simulated long take of the druid going through different wild shapes as in a scene. That's really impressive. I thought it was really, really good. There's a whole sequence around a mirror that really, really, really touched me because I felt it was such a really inventive use of camera work and visual effects. But does it feel like D&D? Does it feel like D&D? A few people I've talked to have said, "Oh yeah, I've had sessions where it's been like exactly that." I've been a GM or a DM for over 30 years. I I will admit that I've had moments in my games that are similar to these things, but I've never had a campaign that was identical to this thing. There were some moments, and there are certain moments in the movie which are played for laughs, but people who play D&D can see the extra subtext, because whenever there's a moment of humor, a lot of times it's actually a moment of humor that's in the movie, but people who played the game will see another level that makes it even funnier, which I think was the reason why people who play D&D will probably find the film more enjoyable and funnier than people who haven't, because every joke that's like a 4 is a 6 for a D&D player because they can pick up the actual subtext. And there's some things about the story I really, really enjoyed. I love the actors. The actors are very, very good. I'm a huge fan of almost all the actors there. Chris Pine is my second favorite Pine outside of Christopher Walken. Um, Michelle Rodriguez, I'm a huge fan of Michelle Rodriguez. I've been a fan of hers for a very, very long time. I think she's one of the most underappreciated actors in Hollywood. and the fact that she has one of the most successful streaks in Hollywood, something that people kind of ignore. Justice Smith, I'm actually a huge fan of Justice Smith. One of my scripts that I wrote actually has him in my head for the cast, so I absolutely am a fan of Justice Smith. Hugh Grant, I'm a huge fan of Hugh Grant. If you ever want to see him doing a really different role, watch Cloud Atlas because that was a hell of an amazing role. I don't know much about the other people, mind you, um, and I'm not going to bring up the once again hilarious moment where Holga goes home, and I'll only say that, and you just have to figure that out because you know what I'm talking about. Because it is, I had to do almost a triple take before I realized who was in the scene. It was really funny. Um, I don't know about Sophia Lillis too much. I thought she did a really, really good job. She is just really impressive. I thought she did a really, really good job. And it's really fascinating. Something people didn't bring up. Simon, played by Justice Smith, the spellcaster. Um, when he casts a spell, he's actually using American Sign Language. And if you read the hand signs, apparently he's saying the spell. Justice Smith claims that was his idea, and I think that's amazing. And someone also made a great observation, which I think really points to how well written that the film is. The fact that there are four player characters in the movie. There are four characters are the players. Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Justice Smith, Sophia Lillis. Those are the characters. Those are the main characters. Those are the player characters. They talk like they're player characters. Stuff goes wrong. Every one of them screws up at least once, and and once in a while they do something amazing. So at least one point during the movie, they crit fail and they crit success. Everybody else is an NPC. Hugh Grant's character obviously is an NPC, but what people think, they think the paladin Xenk Yendar, played by Rej Jean Page, is a PC. He's not. He's an NPC, and you know why he's an NPC. He comes, he leaves. He does not, he only comes up for a short session. He's amazing at everything, and he exposits. So he is absolutely not a player character. He is a pet NPC. And once I figured out that he was a pet NPC, I think D&D might have gone up to maybe an 8.7, even a 9. Because I walked out, I was like, that's a solid 8, 8.5. And then when then I realized that that paladin character was an NPC because he exposits and he's awesome at everything. I immediately loved that character because a lot of the D&D tropes are there, but the film doesn't go, and point to it. You basically have to know that it's a D&D movie to know that trope, to know the fact that, oh yeah, this character here is an NPC. And that's the stuff that I really appreciate. I think the film is very entertaining. And what else can I say about it? I thought the directors and the writers did a fantastic job. I think it sets up a good setting for like potential sequels because I do want to see these characters continue. If I was to say anything negative, well, I guess you could say the fact that once again, if you don't know D&D, the funny thing is that even though I've played D&D for 30 years, I've not played in D&D that often. The number of times I played in Greyhawk when I was really young. But if I was to tell you how long I've ever played Forgotten Realms, not that long. I would wager to guess that I barely ever played in Forgotten Realms. It's been custom homebrew settings that someone else has created or I have created, or it was Greyhawk. So even though I know the terms Baldur's Gate, Never, and whatever the other places are, Neverwinter and all that stuff, I only know them from the video games. I don't know them from the lore of D&D itself. The spells were recognizable, and that brings up I think kind of one of the final points I wanted to bring up, which is something that actually annoyed me. As I was leaving the theater, I actually heard a half a dozen people nitpicking the game's mechanics, saying that, and literally saying like, "Well, she's casting 20th level spells. Meteor Swarm, Time Stop are high level spells. And so Simon's character, who is a bumbling sorcerer, clearly is not as high level. And if you know D&D rules, the moment you have a level disparage with a sorcerer, you lose. Because that's actually one of the flaws of D&D is that the differences between characters gets more like a sorcerer is basically worthless until he gets about 6 or 7. When I say sorcerer, wizard, they're worthless till about 5 or 6 level. Then there's this moment where they're really, really good, but they're on par with the other characters. But then around 12 or 13, the wizard just zips past them. And throughout every edition of D&D, with the exception of fourth, that problem has always been rooted. It's always been there, and they've never been able to fix it. So yeah, the Red Wizard is a 20th level character. And the funny thing is, when they were explaining in the promotions, they were presenting these characters as being about 5th or 6th level, which of course they would never survive against a 20th level sorcerer. Except that Simon, the character of Simon the sorcerer, does do reverse gravity. He does do some spells that are higher level than you would think that he should be able to do. But for the character's sakes, they made him to lack confidence, so he wasn't a very reliable spellcaster. And but the ultimate truth is that if you're going into the game, into this thing hoping for to game accurate systems, game accurate scenes, you're going to be disappointed, and you're going in with the wrong mindset. And I have thankfully not seen a negative review that said the reason why I don't like it is because it's not faithful to the game's mechanics. I think I would lose my mind if somebody said that the reason why they disliked the film was because it wasn't faithful to the game mechanics. This is a film that's honoring D&D. It is reflective of the fun people have. It is not a movie about a poorly balanced set of rules tied to a tabletop pen and paper game. So the character arcs were more realistic, and the characters were equal to each other in some way. Yes, Chris Pine is a bard, but he never casts a spell. And a bard that doesn't use the spells is basically kind of worthless. But that being said, they made him the leader, and they made his charisma a dominant attribute. They played him the way a bard, in my opinion, should be. Holga is very much barbarian, and then we get to the paladin, and he is very much a paladin in attitude, and I do like the way that panned out. But I think the only person that's 100% realistic mechanically would probably be Michelle Rodriguez's barbarian. Everyone else is a slightly variation, and everyone's been going to town the fact that the tiefling druid, while it shapes into an owlbear, which in the core mechanics of the game you can't do. But like I said, I am very, very happy that it was trying to be faithful to the experience, not to the rules themselves. And like I said, even thinking about it now, there are really great moments. I think of the intellect devourers, and that could have turned into an action scene. That could have turned into some type of horror moment, and they turned it into one of the funniest moments of the film. And like I said, if there's a point where they can make humor out of a situation, they will trade action for humor. And that's why the film, if you were to ask, oh, does it have a lot of adventure? I go, yeah, it has it. But if you were to tell me what are the good action set pieces, I would say there's a sequence in the middle and 2 sequences at the end of the film. But if you're going for action, you're in the wrong film. This is a film that's all about humor. It's about joy. And some people have compared it to other kind of fantasy comedies. It's definitely not Knight's Tale, because Knight's Tale is a film that makes you smile, but it's a film that takes its content seriously. It's not satirical. It's not a spoof. It's funny because of the characters talking and making things funny, but the situation itself is not funny. D&D has moments where the situation is itself funny. Princess Bride is probably the closest one. Like I said, the only thing they didn't do is to have cutaways to the player group, but I think everything else was probably the intent of trying to create something that was similar to Princess Bride. You have moments of just goofiness intermixed with moments that should be considered a bit more serious, but it's a little tongue-in-cheek. And to compare yourselves to Princess Bride is a hell of a feather in your cap. If you can get 1/8 of saying this film is good, it's a good film, it's almost as good as Princess Bride, that puts you in the top 10% in fandom. Now, this film cost about $150 million, very expensive. With the advertising budget, you're probably looking at $250 million that they have to make worldwide before they can turn a profit. And that means we'll probably round up and say this film needs to make $300 million worldwide. It's made $70 million opening weekend, and unfortunately, they have the Mario Brothers movie coming out this week. I'm really hoping, because of my desire to see the film again, that it will have the legs to continue on. Um, and I know that the movie makers are satisfied with the opening, and I think we're going to see it. We're going to see it carry on with a lot more legs. And I think once we see how it's affecting the brand, that might also push to it. The other thing that's also important to note is no one's talking about the film has a $150 budget. It's made by Paramount and E1. I don't think any one company is supporting is basically carrying that $150 million. One thing no one's talking about how much money Hasbro has tossed in. Now Hasbro owns E1, and so for their perspective, now Paramount, I wouldn't be surprised if Paramount's taking a larger chunk of the profit because they've got very few ancillary areas for them to make money. What Hasbro does, Hasbro has a brand that they can sustain, which with this very good movie. So if the film breaks even for them, they'll probably consider it to be a massive success because of how it's going to encourage and bolster their brand. So we don't know how much has been split between E1 and Paramount or what their profit margin is. I wouldn't be surprised that if this film just breaks even or makes a small profit, that Paramount will probably be walking away with a lot more money than we think they are. And that E1 will probably end up with less. But because it's owned by Hasbro, they're probably looking at the impact within the brand and looking at the positives that come out of that. So I think that if this continues, we may see a sequel. And I really want there to be a sequel. Interestingly enough, I don't want to see another John Wick. I think the fourth one should be the last one. They can do side and spin off, sure, but I definitely want to see another one of these. Anyway, I didn't want to go too far into this. I really like the D&D movie. Sound off in the comments what your favorite scene is. Do you have a favorite moment? What you expect from the future, and talk about it. If you want to say you hate it, go ahead and hate it. You're not going to change my opinion, but I definitely think, especially when you look at the audience score and the critical acclaim, that I'm not terribly worried about the angry voices rising up because I know they are very much in the minority. So I'm very happy about that. Anyway, guys, this has been Chris from Deus Ex Machina signing off.